Hello and welcome everyone. Good afternoon to the afternoon session of FounderTribes panel on angel investing, namely how to get that raise, the first 250,000 pounds from angel investors. My name is Rico Roberts and I'm the head of IR here with FounderTribes and also an angel investor. And today we're very fortunate to be joined with Jabal Harani of Velocity Capital and Marie Headley of Workforce Buddy, Patricia Hamzahi of the Black Funding Network and a philanthropist, Rustin Brown of Manat, Phelps and Phillips, and impact investor James Broderick. Before we begin, I want to thank you all again for taking the time to chat with us. And I'd love if we could just have a brief introduction about yourself and how you became involved in angel investing. So why don't we start first with Anne-Marie?
Okay, good afternoon and good morning to everybody. So my name's Anne-Marie Headley. I am a people consultant at Google. I'm also the founder of Workforce Buddy, which is a people consultancy that's set up to support specifically startup and scale-up organizations. I'm quite new to the angel world. I started investing about 2 years ago. FounderTribes was my first investment actually, and now I have 3. So that's how I got involved.
Great. And Patricia? And Patricia,
am I not on mute? Am I on mute? No.
No.
No, you can hear me. Go ahead. Sorry. I wear many hats. It says on the screen that I can see Integrity Capital, but I'm also a co-founder of Extend Ventures, which some of you in the audience probably know has done some extensive research into the diversity of funding available, the access to funding available to diverse founders. But I'm also here specifically because I am an angel investor. In addition to Founders Tribe, I'm also an LP in Impact X, and I also have do invest in, particularly in the social impact arena, where I work with up-and-coming young social entrepreneurs who are trying to get their ventures off the ground. And yeah, I'm very delighted to be here. Thank you.
Great. And Rustin, if you could give a brief introduction about yourself. I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I was mute. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes, thank you.
Rustin Brown, partner from Manat, Phelps and Phillips in Washington, D.C. I focus on emerging companies and venture capital. I am also an angel investor. I made my first angel investment last year around July. I invested in my roommate from college. His mother is Joe Mangano, who is a famous HSN celebrity who was coming out with a line of products to help combat COVID. And so I made investments in that. And then since then, me and my wife have made a number of investments, many in the impact space. We use a network called Halcyon based out of DC as well as kind of our primary filter of angel investments.
Wonderful. And James, if you could also give a brief introduction to yourself. Or Jamie, excuse me.
Hi, Rico. Hi, everybody. I'm Jamie Broderick, and I'm a board member at the Impact Investing Institute. My background is in wealth management and asset management. So I was CEO of JP Morgan Asset Management Europe, and then CEO of UBS Wealth Management UK. I basically got into angel investing when I left the financial services sector. So when I left the financial institution, the compliance shackles came off, and I discovered this fantastic world. It's so much more interesting than public markets. It's an opportunity to be part of startups without it consuming your entire life the way it consumes a founder's entire life. So I could never start a company, but it's kind of a vicarious experience, a more diversified experience of the excitement of people solving the world's problems. So I've been at it since I retired from financial services, so a couple of years, and that includes FounderTribes.
Wonderful. And finally, Jamal, we'd love to hear your introduction and background.
Yes, sure. So my name's Jamal. Thank you, Rico, and hello, everyone. So I'm an entrepreneur, having built several businesses in the past, some super successful, some failures. So I've got the T-shirt and the scars to show for it. And I head up, I'm one of the partners at Velocity. We're a venture capitalist. We invest in companies from 150,000 all the way up to 10 million, whether it's seed finance all the way through to Series A, Series B. And as part of that, we also invest in all of the underlying companies ourselves personally. So as an angel investor, it's great. I have skin in the game. What's exciting is that Velocity invests in companies. We look at the management team and the idea. And what's happened is that out of all our 45 companies, over 50% of our founders are either female or underrepresented. So which we're, not by choice, but because we look for great ideas and the people around it and not what school they went to. And that's what we do. And FounderTribes is one of our great companies that we've invested in.
Wonderful. And to that point, I think an interesting difference between institutional capital and angel investing is that, to Jamal's point, the skin in the game is your personal capital. You have a personal stake. My wife and I, we always think about that before we make an angel investment. And to that end, what are some of the criteria that you look at when you're considering an angel or a startup opportunity? And also, how do you assess the potential of the founding team? Jamal, I'd love to start with you with regard to that.
Sure. Well, I think first and foremost, you've got to like the people that you want to work with, and also where you can actually help. There's no point someone from a bioengineering company contacting me and looking at investment because I haven't got a clue. But when you talk about consumer products, products I can really relate to, you want to get involved. So the first thing is that we look at the people and can we actually add value? Because the part of angel investing that's important is having a right fit. It's not about the money, it's about the smart capital. And at an early stage, you need angel investors who are going to actually help you open some doors, help you get your first customer, all of those kind of things that really help you grow your business. And then, so that's the first thing we look at is the people, and can we work with them, and is their idea any good, and can we add value? And then the rest of the journey then begins.
Awesome. And Patricia, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I totally agree with Jamal in terms of the things to look for in terms of the individuals leading the business and sort of the strategy they have behind their business. But I personally look beyond that, because those are just investment fundamentals, and hopefully we can all sign up to that. But I particularly look at investing in organizations, companies that are able to make some wider impact, who would have a wider impact. That's how I look at it. So that's why I did invest in FounderTribe specifically, because the whole premise was I could invest in a great company that is going to sort of be a good business and and be led by a underrepresented founder. But something like FounderTribes or ImpactX as well are making a kind of infrastructure systemic impact. And for me, if I'm going to invest my capital, that's where I see the value that I can bring. That again, I can just be a stock picker and just invest that way, or I can sort of say, can my capital have greater intention and greater impact? And that's the criteria I place around the investments that I make, especially because we know that kind of angel investment that we would be doing, while there's not a huge amount of capital going into these businesses, right? If you don't have access to friends and family, if you don't have access, and you certainly don't have access to institutional capital, the angel investment community is really, the angel investor community is really probably one of your only real source of startup capital. So that's my thinking. Thank you.
Wonderful. And Jamie, coming from the institutional side to angel investment, how do you look at companies, and does the criteria change?
Well, first of all, I start with a series of circles that represent my interests, and then they intersect in a Venn diagram. So, and I think that's quite idiosyncratic, and I think possibly unlike some of the institutional approaches. So I'm interested in underrepresented founders, gender, finance, impact investing, and then for various reasons, West Africa and Egypt, and then the UK. So basically what that means is if you're a Black woman setting up an inclusive finance proposition in Ghana through a UK holding company, I'd be putty in your hands. So I think part of the whole thing is, what are the things that specifically interest you, and that can be quite idiosyncratic with an angel investor. I think unlike institutional investors who tend to be a lot more organized about it. But just moving beyond that, I think some of the things that you're looking for is, yes, you look at the people, but you're also looking at, you have to realize that there's a very good chance that this startup will pivot. It will learn enough to do something different. So you have to invest not just in the idea, but in the people. When you look at the people, are these founders ready to pivot if circumstances require? And so that's one of the questions. It's great. I mean, obviously you're looking for somebody who is solving a problem that you care about. Absolutely. But it's very possible that they'll pivot on the way there. And what that means is you have to be able to feel comfortable that your founder team is going to have the ability to pivot and aren't just obsessively focused on a single outcome. I think that's one of the big things for me. The other, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, wonderful. And Anne-Marie, what are your thoughts with regard to the criteria that you look at when considering a startup opportunity or angel opportunity, and how do you assess the founding team?
Yeah, sure. So I tend to be personally drawn to companies that are either trying to solve a real world problem or that have a business idea that's going to help people lead more healthier or happier lives. And in terms of the founding team, I think there's a number of different areas to explore. I think one is previous experience and track record. So, have they been involved in building something in the past, not necessarily a startup, but what's their track record in building and being part of an operation. I also think kind of domain expertise. So what's their knowledge of this particular sector? How well do they understand the problem that they're aiming to solve for? And then I think there's also something around support system in particular, what's the caliber of their advisory board, and also from a skills perspective, what skills do they have in this area? Personally, I'm very much drawn to, their aspirations for the business, whether or not they're in it for the long term, and also what their values are. So does this make for a good relationship, a good long-term relationship?
Wonderful. And Rustin, we'd love to hear your thoughts as well in terms of how you analyze the criteria you use for investing in startups, and also how do you look at the founding team?
Yeah, for me, one, I like to see founders who have been validated by organizations. So as I mentioned, the Halcyon House in DC. There's other kind of Techstars and things of that nature that show that somebody has gotten a little bit of a track record. I think that's helpful, particularly when you're making early stage investing. Is making sure that people who have done some of the early low hanging fruit of pitching to a competition, whether it be local or on a national scale like Techstars or Y Combinator, but something that shows that they've done more than just come up with an idea, that they're doing some of the groundwork to come up with a revenue model and a plan for how they're going to grow and scale in the future.
Wonderful, wonderful. And one of the interesting things, what attracted me to FounderTribes was that they are really disrupting the startup and VC ecosystem in a way that hasn't been seen before, and combining technology, Tinder for founders, and to that end, what advice would you give to underrepresented entrepreneurs seeking angel funding? So if an angel investor came to you and said, "Hey, I have this great idea. I know nothing about raising capital. I know nothing about fundraising. What advice would you give to them?" And why don't we start with you, Anne-Marie?
Yeah, I guess one of the important things for investors is like what's the growth potential for the business idea, and how likely is it that they're going to get a return on that investment. So I think it's important to have that top of mind if you're pitching an idea, to think about what's in it for the potential investors as well. In terms of advice, I think for underrepresented founders, I would always say yourself. You still there? So that your leadership is growing complexity. Am I back now?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear us?
And so the other thing, yes, I can hear you now. That's perfect. So yeah, the other thing I always say is work on yourself as well as the business, so that your leadership is growing alongside the complexity of the business. And if you are a leader for the first time, I think it's always great to try and get a commitment from your stakeholders in an investment in your ongoing leadership development as well.
Wonderful. And Jamal, what are some of the advice that you've given to underrepresented entrepreneurs as they seek angel funding?
Okay, I'm an underrepresented fund manager. You don't see many of us around. So
yes,
but what I did and what we focused on was making sure we get our proposition right, and we're very clear on what our proposition is. And then investors invest. We have over 600 investors in our fund, and of all colors, all shapes and sizes. So what I always say to founders, and particularly underrepresented founders, is first of all, know your product, know your market, do your research, because sometimes, if you've got to become the expert and really have conviction on why you believe that you are there changing the world, why are you going to have an impact with your product, why is it going to disrupt? So have complete conviction and really understand the market, and then do your research before you speak to an angel. Understand what they're interested in. Most of them will have a LinkedIn profile. Most of them they've been successful, will have done something. They'll have stuff on Google, whatever the stuff is. Just, do your research so that you understand what they're interested in. And then when you go and see them, you've got the ability to develop that relationship, know what their hot buttons are, and then pitch your proposition, knowing your proposition inside out, so you can demonstrate what the opportunity is. Don't let the fact, and I know, we invested in FounderTribes, I know what the stats are, but don't let that stop you, because it then becomes a numbers game, because the world is waking up, that there's a lot of talent out there, and that people are not looking at. So, it is an opportunistic market, but know your product, know your people that you're going to pitch to, so that you can bowl them over when you actually talk to them.
Wonderful. And Rustin, what are some of what advice would you give to underrepresented entrepreneurs as they seek maybe their first time raise?
Yeah, no, that's primarily who I work with in my emerging company work at Manat. And a lot of times it's an education on what venture means long term, right? And understanding the difference between angels and where they might want to go, which is getting to the VCs or getting the exits. And so letting them know it's a process, and that that they should focus on things that are not the slick pitch deck. I have a lot of people who come to me and say, review my pitch deck, and I say, I don't even care what your pitch deck says, because if you don't have a product that's scalable, or you don't have an idea of how to run a business, it doesn't matter what your pitch deck says or how pretty it is, because people are going to see right through that. And so what I work with founders on is really making sure that they have they're tight from the fundamentals, particularly for underrepresented founders. It's a lot more difficult because they often haven't gone to the places like Stanford and Harvard that actually teach you the process of going through this. Like, that's part of the curriculum, and that's why those schools have such great success in the VC market, because it's literally part of what they're taught. They're taught the blueprint and the game plan. So with underrepresented founders who probably haven't gone to those schools in most instances, you have to go back and say, okay, here's the playbook that those schools use, and here's what you need to do in order to catch up, because you're probably not quite there yet. But you
Wonderful.
can get there.
Yes, and Patricia, given your perspective, what do you say to underrepresented entrepreneurs who are seeking angel investing?
I might start a little bit earlier than where the others have spoken, and maybe sort of go back to some of what Rustin was saying. So in working, it's pre-seed, right? Early stage, these are people just starting out. And and yes, they probably haven't gone to the Ivy League or the Oxbridge, universities, and they come from background to support them. So they, they don't have the word, the word that we can all use, the networks, to allow them access to angels that other founders have naturally because of those universities and family ties, etc. So that is my advice in a way, right? Yes, have your pitch down. Absolutely, know it word for word and be able to tell it with passion and excitement. But I would say at the early stages, invest in entering as many networks that you can find where you can tell your story. Because once you start telling your story, you will find people who will then be interested in what you're trying to do. But if you are not able to be in a room where you can tell your story, that's where you're missing out. And I know networking sounds exhausting, and and even just finding those entrees can be difficult, but start with the people that you know. Do start with friends and family. Start with your uncle, your aunt, or some other people within your circle. If you went to a local college, start there. Just start with a professor that could have helped you. Just find the avenues, and also and really finding Black and underrepresented founders. Reach out to the ones that you see that you have for just advice, support, pointing you in a direction to a group and an organization that can benefit you. I would just assiduously, that's what I would do. That's where I would spend a lot of my early time, is trying to find those networks and get into those networks, because I think that's where you're going to have the most return on your time and effort.
Yeah, I would say definitely VC and angel investing is a networking business, and it should be, you should always be in the process of networking as you go. Jamie, what are your thoughts on that with regard to perspective that you might give underrepresented entrepreneurs seeking angel funding?
Rico, I just completely agree with Patricia and also what Rustin was saying, because the nut to crack is connectivity. We've called it networking. It's all about connectivity. And if the conventional existing form of connectivity, traditional networking through old school ties and people from the country club and all this stuff that underrepresented founders often don't have access to, then I think we still have to crack the code of connectivity. And that's why I like FounderTribes. I think FounderTribes is a good way of creating connectivity using a 21st century method rather than a 19th century method, which is who you went shooting and riding with and fox hunting with. I think it just takes us into the 21st century, but the basic concept is still all about connectivity. And so FounderTribes allows you to kind of strip away, as you do today in LinkedIn and everything else, where you can now connect much more frequently, but it's fundamentally about connectivity. And so to come back to my Venn diagram and my little circles, I think you have to, as a founder, you have to find a way, as Patricia says, to create a network that's relevant to what you're doing. So if you're in health tech, you do need to find an entry point, I think is the term Patricia used, an entry point into health tech. If you're trying to appeal to Black angel networks, then you need to find contacts there. And I think it's maybe a harder problem for underrepresented founders, but I think you still need to crack the code of connectivity. And you can call it, 21st century networking or call it what you want, but I think that's really what the essence is.
Yeah, I think, and that's the beauty of FounderTribes. It allows for many of us, if we didn't go to, an Ivy League or an Oxford caliber school, to connect with other entrepreneurs and other investors and other mentors, and kind of FounderTribes allows us to even the playing field. One of the things that I've noticed on LinkedIn is that sometimes I'll get inquiries from people that I don't even know how they reached out to me, but they'll talk about they need funding, they have this wonderful idea, please talk, if we connect and talk. And so I was wondering, with regard to that, when is a good time for founders to start thinking about raising or to start thinking about investing? Like, when should they even approach what should the mindset of a would-be founder or underrepresented founder be when it comes to thinking about raising? Like, when's a good time to start thinking about it? Do they need to have an MVP at a minimum before they start thinking about it, or a really disruptive idea? Jamal, I'd love to get your perspective on that.
Okay, I think it's important to have a business plan or an idea and research through in terms of what your proposition is. And then it's really, there are lots of funds and grants available, startup loans that are available in the UK. Explore those, because even your local authority will have grants available for you. So use that opportunity to access some capital and grants to start building a wireframe or an MVP of your product, or to do some additional research, so you can back up your idea and your disruptive idea with what is out there. And then start speaking to experts in the field or people that have been in that type of industry to look at at that point you start looking at angel investment. And also look at, in the UK, you've got a fantastic scheme called the SEIS investment scheme, which enables investors to receive 50% refund via the income tax bracket. So, a lot of investors invest through the SEIS, which is high risk, high reward, and early stage. So there are a lot of SEIS funds that invest in startups at an idea. I came to Velocity as an entrepreneur with an idea and a disruptive idea with a co-founder, and Velocity made their first investment from their SEIS fund and I'm telling you, having looked at some of the decks I see nowadays, mine was pretty shoddy, and it just about got over as a PowerPoint presentation. But they invested in us and the idea, and that was just on a PowerPoint presentation when we gained £150,000 worth of SEIS investment to start the business journey and that founder journey on that product. So there are a lot of SEIS funds. So, you can access it even on a good business idea that you've done good research and say, look, this is our idea, and the funds will invest that. So grants, and then look at the tax efficient investment opportunities that are there.
Wonderful. And Patricia, we'd love to hear your perspective on, when's a good time for founders to start thinking about raising?
Yeah. So I think that it depends on sort of where you are in your sort of business development journey, in the sense that I think angel investment can be early. And while Jamal has identified sort of grants and local authority, the problem with that, to be honest, is that many of the founders I talk to, and I've been doing some focus group with particularly Black founders, and a lot of insights come from that bit of research effort, that they don't know where to go for some of that. They don't have a roadmap. That those opportunities are not easily accessible to many of the founders that we've been talking to. And so, in a way, I would say an angel like Jamal or like Jamie or Resident or Anne-Marie or myself, if we are supporting a business, we can help them navigate and find those resources, because otherwise it's quite difficult for them, and they will miss those opportunities. So I would say start early. Again, family and friends. Your uncle might become your angel, because it's not a gift that they're giving you. They're not just going to give you cash because you're the nephew or niece. You're making an investment proposition, but try to find sources of support that are close to you, and then build out from there. And I would do that at an early stage when you have your business plan, your business proposition, down. And I think that's important, because people need to see that you have the confidence behind your idea, behind your initiative. So that's what they want to see primarily. So once you have that ready, I would go early to look for angel investments. But again, try to start as close to home as you can. Again, local authorities are an interesting source, because lots of times they have local business associations, the equivalent of an LEP or sort of local business hubs. Go there, and as a young or as a startup venture, go along to one of those groups, and then you will find a network already that you can leverage off of. So I would say start as early as you can. Once your business proposition is ready, it has been tested.
Yeah, and I think it's being able to test your pitch on friends and family is a wonderful way to perfect your your craft, perfect your pitch deck, and you have a very I don't want to say easy audience, but a very generous and willing audience who will sit through your pitch, and more often than not they tend to be very supportive. So that's a wonderful way to start with friends and family, and that speaks also to the idea of connectivity that Jamie had mentioned in terms of being connected.
Could I just
and stay? Yes, sir.
Sorry, could I just add one thing to Patricia? I think she raises a very good point, because sometimes you don't know where to access things. So that's what FounderTribes is there for, because you can access information and education where to access things. In the UK, there's a fantastic company called Swoop Funding, where you can literally go as an entrepreneur and identify how to set up a company and get it set up, identify where the grants are available in your area, local area, and you can get it set up, where you can get alternative funding, different types of funding, equity investment, and all the way through the journey. And they're helping at the moment about 80,000 businesses a month to obtain grants, to obtain funding, equity funding, open up business bank accounts, etc. So there are resources out there that can really help first-time founders, early founders, to be able to really access their network and start doing what Jamie suggested, which is connecting to different groups and different people.
Wonderful. And Anne-Marie, what are your thoughts with regard to the timing for founders to start thinking about capital raising and fundraising?
Yeah, sure. I think there's some really great practical advice from Jamal and Patricia there. And I second what Patricia said. I don't think it's ever too early to be thinking about how you could start building relationships with potential investors, and even just the practice of regularly socializing your idea, getting feedback on it is going to be hugely beneficial in terms of getting you to think critically about the plan that you have in place, iterating and refining your ideas as you go. And then you'll also pick up really useful information on what might it be that you need to demonstrate in order to attract the investment when the time comes. So what are those metrics or KPIs that those potential investors might need to see? You're aware of what's important to which investors, and then you've got that in mind when you're ready to look at fundraising, I guess, more formally.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Rustin, what are your thoughts when it comes to the timing for founders when it comes to raising capital?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of factors that are dependent. When I think about raising capital, you have to understand the systems, and you can't ignore how the systems are currently structured. So if you're a founder who has experience at a big corporate or a big investment bank or something like that, where you have experience that VCs can relate to because they know what it's like to work at a big company like that, or then you can go out earlier. But if you're somebody who's starting something out of your basement and you didn't go to the big schools, then you have to do a lot more groundwork ahead of time, and likely you're going to have something more to show. You're going to have at least an MVP and probably even some revenue, because people are going to make determinations, unfortunately. And I think FounderTribes is doing a great job to break down those barriers, but still people are going to look for track record in some respect. And so depending on what your pedigree is, the more things you'll have to do to get into the realm of investors. So if you have a great idea, try to work it as best you can. If it doesn't require a ton of upfront capital, try to do what you can bootstrapping it, and even showing a little bit of revenue with a bootstrapping. Then you can go to an angel and say, hey, this is what I did with $1,000. Imagine if you gave me $25,000, I could do this much, right? And so having those real world examples, I think, help a lot more if you don't have as much pedigree and you're getting started in this space from the beginning.
Wonderful. And lastly, Jamie, how would you like? What's some of the advice that that you've given to founders as they start thinking about raising?
Well, it's interesting. I don't delineate quite so much between the fundraising and the learning process and exploration process. And I think this is a little bit what Anne-Marie was saying, where, and Patricia as well, that I think that you should be creating the connections with people just as part of your informational and your learning and your education and your road testing of your concept. So I'm thinking of one project where I was giving advice on inclusive capital project, for example, in the UK. Somebody asked my advice, what do you think about this? And I was giving advice and critiquing before I knew I was going to end up as an angel investor. So he was coming to me because I knew a little bit about the subject. We talked, we exchanged ideas, we stayed in touch. And it was only much later that he came to me and said, could you put in some capital? And so that process of learning and getting mentored isn't as distinct from the fundraising as some people might think. And so I do think it makes sense to be connecting to the potential world of funders even before you start raising the money. And that was certainly my experience. And if you can find angel investors who are willing to provide some guidance and some technical expertise and some being a sounding board, that's a great preparation for then returning and looking for assistance with capital raising.
Okay. On this issue of connectivity, I'd love to explore that a little more. Some founders may be more extroverted, some founders are introverted, and yet still, how do you encourage founders who may be more reserved to connect or be comfortable in the process of telling their story for their about their product? Like, how do you encourage founders to kind of step out of their comfort zone? Because sometimes a founder might be very siloed and myopic in terms of like building their business, and they want to build the business out or build their product, but they may not want to. They may feel less comfortable in terms of taking that extra step of connecting. How as an angel do you encourage founders to be more connected or to really invest in connectivity? Jamie, I'll start with you.
Well, you're asking the question of an introvert, so I don't have a good answer. I think it must be torture if you're an introverted, cerebral founder trying to go out and raise money. I do think that's where some of the less affective ways of connecting, back to FounderTribes. If you can, if there's a more structured form of interaction. So I think structured forms of interactions like angel network presentations, where it's less about schmoozing people up and more about really the basics and the essence and more of an objective look at the business. That feels where an introvert like me would go hide. But I think it's tough duty if you're introverted to go out there and ask people for money. I don't envy you.
Yeah. And Patricia, what are your thoughts on that in terms of like how should founders look to connect or feel more comfortable in connecting?
Well, one thing I would say is that if you really are serious about creating, building, and launching a business, I do think you have to go out of your comfort zone, because there's going to be so many things demanded of you that you're going to have to do that's not necessarily your natural areas of endeavor. But on a more practical point, unless you're completely a solo entrepreneur, you will usually have a small team. Witness Gary when he was building FounderTribe. You have a small team. At least make sure one of those people are the extrovert balancing act that you need to help cover those areas that you can't do yourself.
Yeah. And Anne-Marie, what are your thoughts in terms of helping as founders look to connect?
Yeah, I would agree. Use the strengths in your team. I also think that practice makes perfect. So we all, I think to some degree, might not like public speaking, or we might not, rush to, do some schmoozing around some fundraising. But ultimately, it's about the passion of the idea and the mission. And even if you're an introvert, if you really believe in what you're doing and the difference that's going to make, you're going to find a way to talk about it and get people excited about it. It might look slightly different from an extrovert, But I think it's part of the course, and I think the more you practice, the more you just jump in at the deep end. Over time, the easier it will become, hopefully.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Rustin, what are your thoughts with regard to founders and connecting?
Yeah, I agree that the team is the most important thing, because if you're an introvert now, you're going to be an introvert forever. And VC is about half the battle of the venture capital world is marketing. I think that and so you have to build a team, and part of being a CEO of a company is knowing where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are, and you form your team around that. And that's when I look at founders to invest in, and as I'm counseling founders, like that's one of the first things that I look at is how did you build your team, because that's going to show how you're going to be an executive as your business grows. And you always have to be thinking about how your business looks at $1 billion when your business is at $0, because if you're not planning and scaling that way, you're going to hit the bumps. You're going to end up doing what a lot of founders do. They get uncomfortable and then they start reacting out of fear. And I think you find a lot of people who have great products and great ideas, because they're afraid of the process, end up doing things to self-sabotage. Whereas if they had somebody to balance them out, who understood the process more or was more extroverted, they could actually find themselves growing. And so really understanding why you're in it. I always say, are you doing this for money? Are you doing this for legacy? Or are you doing this for, because you really, and you have to balance those things, because if you're doing it for one reason, and something tells you, like there's people that are telling you, no, you should be making a ton of money, and you're uncomfortable, it's just not going to work. And I've seen too many failures of great businesses, because people didn't recognize the externalities that are going to come at them when they're taking other people's money.
Yeah, wonderful. And Jamal, from your perspective, have you ever had to advise founders in terms of like maybe stepping out of their comfort zones to connect more with others?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, you can either come across too arrogant, or you can come across as too lack of confidence. And so it's about getting a balance right. And I think Anne-Marie rightly highlighted that it is about practice and practicing your pitch and practicing your thing. But what will shine through is passion. And if you really are passionate about your product, most investors will buy into that. That's what they buy into. And I think also it's worth signing up to various pitch events that are out there and see how other founders pitch their ideas and how they're received, because that's a great way of learning and going, okay, and then going back and practicing yourself, because it is about confidence at the end of the day, but passion will always shine through. I have met founders who are extremely introvert, may come across sometimes as almost being too rude, but yet the passion that they have on their product, you go, okay, I buy into it, because this guy will die on the hill for it, because she's so passionate, she's so believing in what she's doing or what he's doing, that they'll get there. And so I think that's, to me, is the key thing that I look for in any entrepreneur, is their passion and their belief in their product.
Okay, wonderful. As founders, they may, to earlier points that were mentioned, they may not have the education. That's why they come to FounderTribes, or the background. FounderTribes, again, can help equalize all of that. What do you say to founders who are contemplating angel investing versus institutional capital? Would you should more underrepresented entrepreneurs look to angel investing first before they start considering maybe institutional capital? What should be the thought process of a entrepreneur or founder as they look at angel investing versus institutional capital? How should they look at that if you were to give perspective and advice? Jamie, what would you say to them?
I mean, I think it's good to have a mix. I mean, my favorite investments are ones where it's both angel investors and VC at the same time, because they balance each other out. I like the professional, the discipline and profession of the VC, but I also like having the diversity of support that you get from angels. So I think the best thing to do is to have, think about having a mix of both. I think in general, VCs are going to be more efficient and industrial about what they're thinking about. I think angels will be more flexible. They're, generally speaking, certainly speaking for myself, less sophisticated, and so will be more flexible, more likely to be receptive to the theme of investing, more receptive to the fact that the founder is from an underrepresented group. That would be, so I think you have more flexibility. Probably, I think angel investors cut the founder a little bit more slack than VC would. I mean, I don't know if Jamal, you necessarily agree with that, but fundamentally, I think a mix of investors is useful, and you should be thinking about the mix of angel versus VC rather than one or the other.
Wonderful. And Jamal, I'd love to get your perspective on that as well.
Yeah, I agree with Jamie. I think it's really, talk to both. Talk to angels, talk to VCs. Probably angels will act quicker than the venture capitalists coming in, but more than likely you'll have both coming in at the same time, and one will give you discipline. And if the VC doesn't come in and the angels have invested, you've built a relationship with that VC, you're on their radar, and you then update them every month and say, look, by the way, just so you know, this is what we're doing. And you keep them updated, because then they feel that they're part of your journey, and then they may come along at a later stage. So it's never a bad thing if a venture capitalist, a VC says to you, not right for us at this moment in time, because that's a signal for saying, look, you're not quite ready. Come back to me, keep me updated, because I do really like you, because I've made the effort of looking into you.
Wonderful. And Patricia, what are your thoughts? Yes.
Thank you. I did just kind of want to jump in there. I also think we need to have a bit of dose of reality, right? So I'm here. I'm not really here for Integrity Capital, as it says with my name. I'm really here because of Extend Ventures. As I mentioned, we have done extensive research into the access to funding for diverse founders. And our report, Diversity Beyond Gender, people visit us on our website and download it, really showed the huge funding gap that exists. I'm sorry. So I would say, yes, love to have venture capital invested in underrepresented findings, but the reality is, right, that 0.24% of venture capital over the last 10 years in this country went to Black founders. And the even more tragic statistic is 0.02% of the venture capital in the last 10 years has gone to Black women. So that is a huge gap, right? And while we can sort of say, yes, and I do know that since last year and some of the focus on racial equity, et cetera, things are moving. I don't think that they're moving necessarily to close that gap fast enough. So I would say angels are a way, and again, angel investing is a small proportion of startup funding, but still, it's probably, as Jamal has said, they will react quicker if they buy your story, if they believe in you, they will act quicker, and you have a better chance of accessing that capital quicker than VC. And also, there are channels, right? So there's 10 by 10. Right? There's Cornerstone Partners, there's Alma, Angels, investing in women. There are groups who are intentional, angel investing groups who are intentional about their giving, that are starting to emerge, develop, and grow. And I think that's where you can find, again, the investment that startups for underrepresented founders, you can find that.
I have to say very quickly, in the same way that there are, more often than not, we don't see a lot of underrepresented founders, we often don't see a lot of underrepresented investors, such as Jamal and Patricia, and that's something that definitely has to change, because it's again, to the statistic that Patricia mentioned, there is a dearth in both as in the startup ecosystem and also in the investing ecosystem as well, in terms of people of color and underrepresented minorities. Anne-Marie, what are your thoughts in terms of this mix between angel and institutional investing for founders?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I think due to the access issues with VCs, and then some of the additional requirements that come with that type of relationship, I think it might be easier to start with angel investing, and there's a number of benefits to that because it's not just about capital. If you're working with an angel investor, they'll know other angel investors who'll be able to make introductions for you. They might take a personal and hands-on approach to your business, so you're going to get their know-how and expertise, and perhaps they will bring some new energy and inspiration to just elevate the team as well. So that might be a good place to start.
Wonderful. And Rustin, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think angels are definitely the best way to go early stage, and unless you have the next Facebook, it's going to be very difficult to get into VCs, even if you're a white man. And so I think the angel investors provide, as Anne-Marie said, not only the capital, but they're also more likely, because they are investing you in their personal capacity, they're going to be putting their heft and their expertise behind you because they want to protect their investment. And that's the great part of angels, is they have the time, because likely, as you've heard from all of us, most of us, say from Jamal, aren't doing 50 or 100 deals. We're strategically picking 3, 4, 5 deals because that's the amount of money that we have to put in. And so if we're putting in what is our hard-earned savings, we're going to make sure that people that we put our money behind are going to get the best of our knowledge in the various fields that we've come from. And that goes a long way. And I think that's what you have to understand when you're an entrepreneur, is who are the people who are going to have your support. VCs, they just have so many companies in their pipeline. They can only pay attention to so many at any given time. And so you have to make sure that you have people on your side and in your corner. And angels are normally going to be the ones who are advocating for you the most.
Wonderful. I can't believe, I do believe we are at time. I had one more question that I wanted to ask, and I feel like I have to ask it. How can we encourage more underrepresented groups to become angel investors? If we can, I don't know how much time we have, but I had to ask that question. How can we encourage more underrepresented groups to become angel investors? Jamal.
Well, I think it's joining things like FounderTribes and being involved in other underrepresented founders who are looking to raise capital, and that's a great way to access amazing talent. So I would seek it out. It's a great opportunity. It's always about giving back. You've had the opportunity to earn some money. Now let's help others to go on that same journey. So FounderTribes, I would say, is the mechanism I would use.
Okay, Anne-Marie.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think it's great points from Jamal. I think there's more that we can be doing on the outreach side to make investment opportunities more visible, especially for first-time investors as well. And so I think we need to just get more creative about, how we advertise our fundraising, and then also, maybe just be very specific and call out, first-time investors are welcome.
Yeah. I just been told that our time is up. I'm so sorry. I would have loved to hear everyone else's perspective. Thank you all again for taking the time. Rustin, Jamie, Jamal, Patricia, Anne-Marie, thank you so much for taking your time and sharing your expertise. Would love to continue this another time. And thank you. And thank you again, Gary, for putting this together, and for FounderTribes.
Thanks, Rico.
Thank you. Thank you guys again.
Thank you.
Cheers.